Story number 1, The Vanishing Hitchhiker of Highway 365. On a chilly October night in 1973, 19-year-old Jack Thompson was driving his beat-up Chevy pickup along the lonely stretch of Highway 365 in Arkansas. The clock on his dashboard read 11:45 p.m. as he returned home from a late shift at the local factory. As Jack rounded a bend, his headlights illuminated a figure on the roadside, a young woman in a white dress, her arm outstretched in the universal hitchhiker's gesture. Normally, Jack wouldn't pick up strangers, especially at night, but something about the woman's desperate expression made him slow down. He pulled over, and the woman quickly climbed into the passenger seat. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to get to the Johnson Creek Bridge." Jack nodded, noticing how pale the woman looked in the dim light of the cab. Her skin seemed almost translucent, and her eyes were wide and unfocused. He assumed she was just cold and scared from being alone on the dark highway. As they drove, Jack tried to make conversation, but the woman only gave short, cryptic responses. When he asked her name, she muttered, "Sarah," and fell silent again. The atmosphere in the truck grew increasingly tense as they approached Johnson Creek Bridge. Sarah began to fidget, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Just as the bridge came into view, she turned to Jack with a look of sheer terror on her face. "This is where it happened," she whispered. "This is where I died." Before Jack could react, Sarah vanished. One moment she was sitting next to him, and the next, the passenger seat was empty. Jack slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest. He searched the truck and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of the mysterious woman. Shaken to his core, Jack drove to the nearest police station to report the incident. The officer on duty listened to his story with a mix of skepticism and concern. However, when Jack mentioned the names Sarah and the white dress, the officer's expression changed. He pulled out an old case file and showed Jack a photograph. It was Sarah, the same woman he had picked up on the highway. The officer explained that 10 years earlier, on October 13, 1963, 18-year-old Sarah Mitchell had been killed in a car accident on Johnson Creek Bridge. She had been wearing a white dress when she died. Over the years, there had been multiple reports of drivers encountering a young woman in a white dress hitchhiking near the bridge, always in October. Each time, the woman would vanish just as they reached the site of the accident. Jack's encounter was meticulously documented and added to the growing file of similar incidents. The case of the vanishing hitchhiker of Highway 365 became a local legend, with Jack's experience serving as one of the most detailed accounts. In the weeks that followed, Jack couldn't shake the memory of that night. He found himself driving past the bridge frequently, half hoping and half fearing he would see Sarah again. But she never reappeared. Years later, Jack learned that the stretch of Highway 365 where he had encountered Sarah was being renovated. As part of the construction, Johnson Creek Bridge was to be demolished and replaced with a modern structure. On the night before the old bridge was to be torn down, Jack felt compelled to visit the site one last time. As he approached the bridge just before midnight, he saw a familiar figure standing at the roadside, Sarah, in her white dress. This time, she didn't try to hitchhike. Instead, she turned to Jack and smiled, a look of peace on her face. As the clock struck midnight, Sarah's form slowly faded away, leaving behind a soft, shimmering light that lingered for a moment before disappearing into the night. From that day forward, there were no more reports of the vanishing hitchhiker on Highway 365. It seemed that with the destruction of the old bridge, Sarah had finally found peace. Jack Thompson never forgot his encounters with Sarah. The experience had a profound effect on him, leading him to research other paranormal phenomena and eventually become a respected paranormal investigator. He often shared his story as a reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, and that sometimes, the barrier between the living and the dead is thinner than we think. The legend of the vanishing hitchhiker of Highway 365 lives on in local folklore, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lurk in the shadows of a cold October night. And for those who drive that stretch of road, there's always a slight hesitation when approaching the new bridge, a momentary glance at the passenger seat, just to make sure they're truly alone. Story number 2, The Haunting of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. In the rolling hills of Louisville, Kentucky, stands a looming structure that has become synonymous with paranormal activity and dark history. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, once a beacon of hope for tuberculosis patients, now serves as a chilling reminder of the countless lives lost within its walls. Built in 1910, Waverly Hills was originally designed to house 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients. However, as the White Plague ravaged the country, the facility expanded rapidly. By the 1920s, it had become a small city in itself, housing over 400 patients and staff members. The true horrors of Waverly Hills lie in the sheer number of deaths that occurred there. At the height of the tuberculosis epidemic, it's estimated that one patient died every hour. With so much death concentrated in one place, it's little wonder that the sanatorium gained a reputation for being haunted. One of the most infamous features of Waverly Hills is the body chute or death tunnel. This 500-foot-long tunnel was used to transport the dead discreetly from the hospital to the bottom of the hill, where they could be collected by hearses. The staff believed this method would maintain morale among the living patients, who wouldn't have to see the constant procession of bodies leaving the building. After the discovery of streptomycin in 1943, tuberculosis cases began to decline, and Waverly Hills closed its doors in 1961. It briefly reopened as a geriatric care facility but was shut down in 1981 due to patient abuse allegations. Since then, Waverly Hills has become a hotspot for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers. Numerous ghostly encounters have been reported over the years, but perhaps none as chilling as the experience of Mark Stevens, a skeptical journalist who visited the site in October 2008. Stevens arrived at Waverly Hills on a crisp autumn evening, armed with his camera and a healthy dose of skepticism. He had been assigned to write a piece debunking the haunted reputation of the sanatorium. As he walked through the decaying halls, he scoffed at the stories of spectral patients and ghostly nurses. However, as night fell, Stevens found his skepticism wavering. He heard whispers echoing through empty corridors and caught glimpses of shadowy figures darting just out of sight. Still, he rationalized these experiences as tricks of the mind, fueled by the eerie atmosphere of the abandoned building. It wasn't until Stevens reached the 5th floor that his beliefs were truly shaken. This floor was notorious among paranormal enthusiasts, with reports of a spectral nurse who still tended to long-dead patients. As Stevens set up his camera in one of the rooms, he felt a sudden drop in temperature. A soft voice behind him whispered, "It's time for your medicine." Stevens whirled around, his heart pounding, but the room was empty. As he turned back to his camera, he saw a figure reflected in the lens, a woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, her face a mask of decay. Stevens stumbled backward, his camera clattering to the floor. The ghostly nurse advanced, her hollow eyes fixed on him. In a panic, Stevens fled the room, not stopping until he reached the relative safety of the parking lot. When he finally gathered the courage to retrieve his camera the next day, Stevens found that the footage was corrupted. However, the audio was intact, and it clearly captured the nurse's whisper and Stevens' terrified reaction. The experience transformed Stevens from a skeptic to a believer. His article, far from debunking Waverly Hills' reputation, became a chilling account of his encounter with the supernatural. It sparked renewed interest in the sanatorium and led to numerous paranormal investigations. Today, Waverly Hills Sanatorium stands as a testament to the thin veil between our world and the next. It continues to attract ghost hunters and curious visitors, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the spirits that still roam its halls. The story of Mark Stevens is just one of many that contribute to the dark legacy of Waverly Hills. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, there's no denying the palpable sense of unease that permeates the building. It serves as a grim reminder of the thousands who suffered and died within its walls, their spirits perhaps still seeking the peace that eluded them in life. As October rolls around each year, the activity at Waverly Hills seems to intensify. Perhaps it's the thinning of the veil between worlds, or maybe it's simply the power of suggestion in the spooky autumn atmosphere. Whatever the reason, those who dare to walk the halls of Waverly Hills during this time often leave with their own chilling tales to tell. The haunting of Waverly Hills Sanatorium remains one of America's most enduring ghost stories, a dark chapter in the nation's history that continues to fascinate and terrify in equal measure. Story number 3, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. In the frigid expanse of the Ural Mountains, a mystery has endured for over 6 decades, defying rational explanation and haunting the imaginations of those who encounter its chilling details. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, named after the group's leader Igor Dyatlov, stands as one of the most perplexing and unsettling events in modern history. On January 23, 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers, mostly students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, set out on a skiing expedition to reach Odorten Mountain in the northern Urals. Led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, the team was well prepared for the challenging winter conditions they would face. The group's journey began uneventfully. They reached the edge of a highland area and prepared to cross through the pass on February 1st. As a safety precaution, they left food and equipment in a forest belt, which they planned to use on their way back. That evening, they set up camp on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, which translates to Dead Mountain in the local Mansi language. This is where the known facts end and the nightmare begins. When the group failed to return as scheduled, search parties were dispatched. On February 26, the searchers made a grisly discovery that would confound investigators for decades to come. The expedition's abandoned and badly damaged tent was found first, cut open from the inside. Despite the freezing temperatures, some of the group's belongings, including shoes and warm clothing, were still inside the tent. A trail of footprints, some barefoot, some wearing only socks, others with a single shoe, led away from the tent and down the mountain slope. At the edge of the nearby woods, under a large cedar tree, the searchers found the remains of a small fire. Around it lay the bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. Despite the sub-zero temperatures, they had apparently died from hypothermia. The bodies of Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin were found at intervals of 300, 480, and 630 meters from the tree, in poses suggesting they had been attempting to return to the tent. Shockingly, Slobodin's skull had a small crack in it, but it was not thought to be a fatal wound. It took 2 more months to locate the remaining 4 bodies in a ravine 75 meters further into the woods. These victims, Nicholas Thibault-Brignolol, Ludmila Dubainina, Alexander Kolovatov, and Alexander Zolotaryov, were better dressed than the others, but their injuries told a horrific tale. Dubainina's tongue and eyes were missing. Zolotaryov and Dubainina had major chest fractures that could only have been caused by an immense force, comparable to a car crash. Strangely, there was no external trauma associated with these injuries. The official Soviet investigation concluded that an unknown compelling force had caused the deaths. The case was closed, classified as top secret, and the area was sealed off for years. Over the decades, numerous theories have been proposed to explain the Dyatlov Pass incident. Some suggest an avalanche forced the group to flee their tent. Others point to infrasound-induced panic, secret Soviet weapons tests, or even a Yeti attack. Each theory seems to explain some aspects of the incident while leaving others shrouded in mystery. One of the most disturbing elements of the case came to light years later. A few of the victims' clothes were found to be radioactive. This finding fueled speculation about secret military tests in the area, but no concrete evidence has ever surfaced to support this theory. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation, ultimately concluding that an avalanche was the most likely cause of the tragedy. However, this explanation fails to account for many of the bizarre aspects of the case, including the radioactivity and the inexplicable internal injuries. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains a chilling reminder of the untamed power of nature and the limits of human understanding. Each October, as the days grow shorter and the nights colder, the story resurfaces, captivating a new generation with its mix of tragedy and inexplicable horror. For those who venture into the wilderness, especially in the unforgiving terrain of mountain ranges, the fate of the Dyatlov group serves as a grim warning. Sometimes, the greatest terrors are not the monsters of our imagination, but the unknown forces that lurk in the most remote corners of our world. The pass where the incident occurred now bears the name of the ill-fated group's leader. Dyatlov Pass stands as a silent memorial to 9 young lives cut tragically short, and to a mystery that continues to chill the blood of all who hear its tale. As we reflect on this story, we're left with the unsettling realization that sometimes, the truth can be more terrifying than any fiction. The Dyatlov Pass incident reminds us that even in our modern world, there are still dark corners where the unknown reigns supreme, waiting to challenge our understanding of reality itself.